So what I'm going to talk about tonight is kind of that background of the work they did looking at the health of all the schools and the churches in the diocese, and then what became of that. And as you know, last year we introduced the Good Shepherd Scholarship, so I'm going to kind of talk about how that leads up to that scholarship and the tuition that we announced last year. So after we looked at kind of the health of the schools across the diocese, so at the time we had 33 schools, and the year that we looked at, because it was a full year, was the 2016-2017 school year. And when we looked at that school year, the Lincoln Diocese had about 6,800 students in 33 schools across the diocese, all right? And in the Lincoln Diocese, we've had a tradition of a lower tuition model that is subsidized by our parishes. So on average, across the diocese, parents were paying about 17% of the cost of education. So the average cost of education for a grade school was about $6,000, and for high school it was about $7,000. But our tuition ranged all the way from $185 all the way up to $3,900. And so what we looked at when we looked at the health of schools, the Meitler Group had suggested or had recommended that we close 5 schools because they had continually lost money. And so the kind of as a result of the Meitler Group study, we ran the Joy of the Gospel campaign. And out of that, the diocese raised $63 million, and $20 million of it was designated to schools, to help the schools to become more stable. All right, so we had 5 schools that were in danger of closing, and then we probably had 5 or 10 more right after that. And it's kind of hidden because most of the schools will show a zeroed out budget, or they'll show enough income to cover their expenses. But the way that they do that is by getting an assessment over from the parish, so the parish tops them off. And if you look at any business, 80 to 90% of the expenses are salaries, right? And salaries always go up. And so unless parish giving is going up, eventually you can't afford it. Eventually you can't afford our low tuition model. And what's happened over the last 20 or 30 years, in the Lincoln Diocese, we actually had no tuition 30 years ago. But parents understood that if you have no tuition, then you have to tithe. That's the only way it works, because somebody has to pay the salaries and pay for the school, right? And what happened over the last 20 or 30 years is we kept trying to have the low tuition model, but we didn't educate parents and parishioners on the stewardship model, that we needed to have 8 to 10% donated to the parishes to support that low tuition model. And so we were kind of sitting on the fence on that. And it was interesting, when I first started working on this, I looked at Catholic schools across the United States, and 20% of the Catholic schools in the United States have closed in the last 10 years. Just in 10 years, that's 1 in 5. And what typically happened was, at the last minute, they just closed. And the reason they closed was because they couldn't make payroll. So eventually you run out of your savings, right? You run out of that income because you don't have enough to cover it. Your weekly and holy day is not covering it. And then eventually you start taking out of any savings that you have. And then eventually you start borrowing money to cover operating expense. Or you have to raise tuition. So about 95% of the dioceses in the United States have raised their tuition to the cost of education. And so if you take your kids to Omaha, Nebraska, you'll pay $10,000 to $12,000 for high school tuition, which is the cost of education. And that's what most dioceses ended up having to do. They ended up having to do that in order to keep their schools open. So the Lincoln Diocese, though, because we kind of had this Meitler study, we started looking at the health of the schools. So in 2016-2017, we started 2 funds out of that $20 million from the Joy of the Gospel. $5 million was designated to the Francis Fund schools, which were the 5 schools that were losing money continually. And those 5 schools were costing the diocese $1 million a year to keep them open. You know, think about that number, $1 million. And so those schools the diocese hired me to help them write strategic plans to see if they could get to break even over 5 years. So they had 5 years to break even, and the Francis Fund had $5 million in it, right, for them to get grants to try to stay open, so they didn't close suddenly, but that they had, and their parishioners had, and their parents had visibility that if they didn't get to break even, they weren't going to be able to stay open. And if you, looked at what happened last year, 2 of them decided they could not stay open. They couldn't get to break even, and 3 of them did get to break even, and they've stayed open. And so, kind of at the same time too, it's interesting, the Omaha Archdiocese had hired the Meitler Group, and the Meitler Group recommended that they close 5 schools, and they closed 3 of them immediately because they were continually losing money. And so, kind of about halfway through that then, after we had done the strategic plans, the bishop asked to have like a halftime report. And if those schools weren't going to get to break even, he wanted to know, because we didn't want to spend that $1 million, spend all that money down to nothing, right? If we could save some of that, then we wanted to. And that's when we kind of determined that 2 wouldn't make it. We also had another $15 million that was designated to schools that went to the Flavin Fund. And the Flavin Fund was for all other schools to do innovation projects. And so all the schools in the diocese could submit grant requests every year for something that would help them to become more profitable, get more enrollment, do more marketing, just some ways to get their schools so they were more sustainable. And so the schools got between $50,000 and $75,000 a year for grants over the last 3 to 5 years. When we looked at it then, we looked at all the schools in the diocese, and of all the schools that we had, I said we had 6,800 kids, right? It cost us $41 million to run those schools. So if you added up all the cost, it was $41 million to run our schools. And we collected $5 million in tuition. So we were giving out scholarships of $36 million a year and not telling anyone about it. I mean, that's basically what it equated to, right? $36 million. And so you could see that wasn't going to be sustainable for a long time. I mean, that's just not going to work. So what we looked at was, is there a way to get to a reasonable tuition and then subsidize anyone that's in low income or middle income? All right, and so you noticed last year that the diocese put out direction that tuition for grade schools needed to get to a minimum of $1,300, and that was about 20 to 25% of the cost of education. That's where that number came from, for all the grade schools in the diocese, all right? And then high schools needed to be $1,700 as a minimum, and all the high schools were there. It was in the grade schools that we had a big discrepancy. I mean, the grade school tuition went from $185 to $3,400 for a grade school tuition. So what we wanted to do was get the schools to a reasonable tuition, around 20 to 25% of the cost of education, and then make sure that we offered scholarships for anyone that fell in the middle to low income. And so we looked at the numbers, and about 15 to 17% of that 6,800 kids qualified for the federal lunch program. So we developed a scholarship that would give low income or needs-based scholarships for students whose families were within 200% of the poverty level. So we tried to go up into the middle income, right? And so last year we gave out $1.2 million in scholarships to families, and we gave about 1,180 scholarships to about 15% of the students in the diocese. And so the schools raised their tuition, and about 14 of the 33 schools had to raise their tuition significantly. Okay? And then we gave out scholarships to the lower income families and the beginning of the middle income family, right? Which allowed the schools to have more money. So they got more money into their schools so they could run their schools, and their parishes didn't have to send so much over in assessments. So where my kids go to school, we have a high school and 2 grade schools. And there's 10 parishes that support Saunders Catholic Schools, right, up in Wahoo, up by Wahoo. we had of those 10 parishes, 7 of the parishes were sending more than 100% of their weekly and holy day giving. More than 100%. So you say, Rita, how does that happen? How could that be? What happened is we all started doing tons of fundraisers so that we could have enough money to run our parishes. So if you come up to Saunders County, you can go to a duck dinner or soup supper just every weekend. Right? And so in my parish, we bring in $60,000 a year in weekly and holy day, and we send the schools $80,000. And so I think what happened then over time as we did this, as salaries went up and our giving wasn't going up, our parishes had to quit doing a lot of things because they were sending all their money to the schools. So our parishes couldn't afford to pay for a secretary, or couldn't afford to pay for a music director, or couldn't afford to pay for a spiritual director for your young adults and that. And so it kind of became that the only mission a parish could support was the school, because it got so expensive the way we were doing it. And so what this committee worked on, it was called the Scholarship and Tuition Committee. We looked at all the schools and we tried to say, well, what's a model where we can get more money into the schools but make sure it's affordable for any family, so any family can come to our school. And that's when we came out with the Good Shepherd Scholarship Program last year. And so last year it was 200% of the poverty level, like I said. This year we've raised it to 225% of the poverty level, qualifies for a needs-based scholarship. And so we're hoping at the diocesan level that we would give out scholarships to 18 to 20% of the schools, or the children in the schools, which means then the parish and the school doesn't have to give them a scholarship. And their tuition will actually be cheaper than it was before. Right? Because we will give up to 75% of tuition for a scholarship. And the scholarship this year will go up. Last year it was $900 for a grade school, and it was $1,300 for high school. This year, the grade school scholarship is $1,300, and the high school scholarship is $1,600. And then next year it'll go up again. So what we're really trying to do is get a new source of funding into our schools, and we'd eventually like to be able to say that the diocese pays for a scholarship for about 30% of the students, which means the parish and the school doesn't have to pay for that. That we make sure they have affordable tuition. So we wanted to continue the legacy of affordable tuition for any family, regardless of income. But before, we were treating every family like they were poor. And it was basically making our parishes and our schools unstable. So if you look at Wahoo, their church, St. Wenceslas. St. Wenceslas brings in $1 million a year in their weekly and holy day, and they send $1 million to their schools. 1 million. You know, let that number sink in. To keep their schools open and to keep our low tuition model. So the diocese is recommending over 5 years to go up to 45% of the cost of education as tuition, and then subsidize the low-income, middle-income family to get that tuition back down for them. And then also we introduced a scholarship for large families, right? So you only pay for 3 students now. And we're one of the only dioceses in the country that does that across all schools. So if you have 3 at Martyrs and 3 at Pius, you only pay for the 3 at Pius. The others are free. So the diocese kicks in a scholarship for that, and then the school picks up the rest of that for whatever that tuition is. So you can send all your kids to Lincoln Catholic schools for what it will cost you to send 1 student to a high school in Omaha. All right? So we wanted to make sure our schools were affordable for the large families, and we wanted to make sure it was affordable for the low income and the middle income. All right, so we have the family tuition cap scholarship. You pay for only 3 students, and any family is available for either of these scholarships regardless of what your religion is. So you don't have to be Catholic to apply for this scholarship. The Lincoln Diocese has also a Lincoln Diocesan regulation that our tuition will never go above 50% of the cost of education. If we do that, if we can stay below 50% of the cost of education, we will be cheaper than 95% of the dioceses in the United States, even at 50% of the cost of education. So what we're trying to do is get to a reasonable tuition model that is affordable for any family and scholarship families in need, large families and families in need. And then we run all the scholarships through the FACTS management system. So Omaha Archdiocese has a scholarship program, and we met with them quite a few times and got a lot of ideas from them. They have to raise $3.5 million a year for their scholarships, and they give out $3 million a year across their archdiocese. But they spend $500,000 managing their program. Because we use FACTS, and it's for all the scholarships, so when you apply in FACTS, you're applying for the Diocesan Scholarship, the Martyr Scholarship, a Pius Scholarship, any scholarship that is out there, you're applying for. Because we run it through there, it costs us nothing. So FACTS doesn't charge the diocese anything, and it doesn't charge the school anything. So we're not having to raise an extra $500,000 to pay for administration. All of our scholarship money goes to the scholarships. So then you might ask, where did the money come from to give these scholarships? So what we did when we looked at all of this, we took what was left of the Flavin Fund and what was left of the Francis Fund, which equaled about $15 million. And that's money that you guys donated, right, to the Joy of the Gospel campaign. There was $15 million left of the 20 that was designated to schools. And so we've created an endowment, and we're trying to keep that money, because then we're just using the interest off that to help pay for the scholarships. So that's perpetual. That's something that can last forever, right? That's something that we can build on and make sure that our Catholic schools are affordable for the long-term future. You know, and when we started looking at this, we were afraid that 1 in 5 of our schools were going to close. Okay, we had 5 that were in danger, and we had 5 or 10 more. And the way that you could see it was not that the school was showing a negative operating income. The parishes were borrowing from savings to top the school off, or they were borrowing from the diocese to get enough money over to make payroll at the schools. And so it was hard for the parishioner or the parent to see it, because it looked like the schools were okay, you know, because we were just making them break even by taking the light item of the parish assessment and making it whatever it had to be. And then the parish had to go run and find money. And so we have, you know, one premier Catholic high school in the Lincoln Diocese that right now is borrowing $350,000 a year to keep it open. You know, how long can a parish take that? And then after 2 or 3 years, you're in the hole $1 million, and you're trying to pay off $1 million, and you don't have a pretty building to look at. All you have is old operating income you couldn't afford. And so what we're trying to do is make our schools more stable, because the ultimate goal is that in 50 years we still have schools. We still have Catholic schools, because our kids need our schools. You know, and when you think about it, there was a group of people that built Martyrs, right? And in Saunders County, in 1910, we first started having Catholic education, 1910. And when they first started having Catholic education, there was no building. So those parents and those parishioners had to build those schools from scratch, hire all the people, and the very first bus that we had in Saunders County, they bought with green stamps. If anybody knows what green stamps are. They saved up green stamps and went over to Chicago, picked up their first bus, okay? But they built it all from scratch. We don't have to do that. We're lucky we don't have to do that. We have to keep our schools open. You know, and I don't want to be part of the generation that helps our schools to close. I don't want to be part of the generation that our schools close under. And so that's why we're doing this. It's not just so that, you know, randomly we can raise tuition because we like to raise tuition. It's so that we can make it affordable, keep it affordable, and then help those parents that need help and help the large family, but really get people evangelized again that Catholic education isn't just for your kid. And when you're done with, Martyrs, you're like, oh good, I don't have to volunteer anymore. You know, no, that's when you really get a volunteer. I had 4 kids that went through Catholic schools, okay? When I added up what I didn't pay in tuition, it was about $100,000. $100,000 that I did not pay in tuition because of the subsidies that our parishes gave. And so that's why I'm here tonight, volunteering to come speak with you guys. You know, because I want other kids to have the advantage that my kids had. And so Catholic education isn't just about your child, it's about all children. And when they built the schools in 1910 or 1989, they didn't build them just for their kids. You know, they didn't say, okay, let's build a school for the next 10 years till my kid graduates. No, they built them so your kids could have Catholic education. You know, and so our job is to make sure in 50 years other kids get this opportunity too. So again, we gave out 1.2 million last year. We estimate with the increase in the scholarship and with going up to 225% of the poverty level, we estimate we'll give out 1.8 million in scholarships this year to about 1,800 students. And so we really encourage everybody to apply. Even if you want to pay all your tuition, still apply for the scholarships because Martyrs gets the money anyway. And so you want as much money out of the diocese as you can get. Right? Start there. Get Martyrs all the money you can get. And then Martyrs is going to offer scholarships in addition to that. So I want to show you what 225% of poverty level means because you might think, you know, that's not that high of income, but it's actually, if you look at a family of 4, which means you have 2 kids. You may only have 1 in school, but you have 2 kids, right? So a family of 4 can make almost $58,000. So you can see that we're trying to cover a good section of the middle income families so that they can still afford our schools. Because if you take, you know, $1,700 or $1,300, or the high school tuition will be about $2,200. You take that times 3 kids, that's a lot of money for anybody. That, you know, that's not cheap, that's a lot of money. And so we want to help those families that need help, and then remember you'll only pay for 3. So this is the income-based. If you have 2 kids, you can make $58,000. If you have 3 kids, you can make almost $68,000. And so the diocese will cover all those scholarships for Martyrs, okay, for those families that apply through FACTS. So the scholarships can be up to 75% of tuition. And in 1920, the scholarship was $1,300 for high schools and $900 for grade schools. This year it will be $1,600 for high schools and $1,300 for grade schools. And then next year it's $1,900 for high schools and $1,600 for grade schools. You know, that's a good amount of money. It's a good amount of money that your tuition, whatever it will be, can be subsidized, and you don't have to pay for that as the parish, but the diocese pays for that. So, you want to maximize the scholarship though, right? So last year we gave direction that we had a minimum tuition, and that was $1,300 for grade schools. This year we're not saying you have a minimum tuition, but if you want to maximize the scholarship, you're only going to get 75% of tuition. And so if Martyrs wants to maximize that $1,300 for you, their tuition has to be $1,750. Does that make sense? Otherwise, you're only going to get 75%. So if you leave it at $1,300 tuition, you're only going to get $900 per student. So Martyrs wants to move theirs up to the $1,750 to maximize the scholarship from the diocese. So the tuition would be $1,750, but the diocesan scholarship is $1,300. So the low-income or middle-income family pays $450 for tuition. So that's better than what Martyrs was offering themselves, right? And that's kind of the model. That's the explanation of the model. And, you know, Pius's tuition is around $2,500. Well, we're going to give a scholarship of $1,600, which would bring the actual high school tuition down to $900 instead of $10,000 in Omaha per student. So other types of assistance. And so we have highly subsidized tuition. You know, whether parents knew it or not, we had subsidized tuition. So when you paid $800 or $185 or $3,400, it was really costing somewhere between $4,000 and $10,000 to educate your children. So that, and we're still going to do that. 50%, no more. We will never charge more than 50% of the cost of education. The Good Shepherd Scholarship is needs-based, and we will give up scholarships to anyone within 225% of the poverty level. We have the family tuition cap, so you'll never pay for more than 3 students in K through 12. And then you also have the ability to have local, parish, and school scholarships, which you guys, they're going to talk about in just a minute. Okay. So the guidance, last year we gave guidance on 3 things, really 4 things. So the first one was you had to have minimum tuition, and if you got to the minimum tuition, then you could participate in the scholarship program. Okay? But we couldn't give a scholarship to a school that was giving $185 tuition, right? That didn't make sense, and so they had to get to the minimum. One of the ways that we kept tuition low was kind of on the backs of our teachers, because we kept our teacher salaries low. So some of our teachers were making 50 to 60% of the local public school as salary. When I started working on the strategic plan with Saunders Catholic Schools, their base salary was $23,000 for a high school teacher. You know, that's barely poverty level. Most of our teachers would have got a scholarship. And so over 5 years, we worked on getting it up to 80 to 90% of the public school, and we did that. So Newman did that. They were able to get it up to 87% of the public school, but it took a lot of money to do it and a lot of effort. The other guidance was to get those parish assessments down to no more than 80% of weekly and holy day. So you can see that Newman still has a lot of work to do there, because some of our parishes are still giving more than 100% of their weekly and holy day income to the schools. And so we still have to kind of work on getting those parish assessments down. And then the fourth guidance was to have the schools do strategic plans, and about half the schools have done a strategic plan, including Martyrs, so you guys were ahead of the game. And then the other schools have to work on a strategic plan, and that plan has to work on how they get to fair compensation for their teachers, and how they get to giving some of the money back to their parishes, so the parishes can still act like parishes and do other mission work other than just Catholic education. So why are we doing this? We want to ensure that we have Catholic education in the future for all children. We want it affordable for all income levels. We want anyone to be able to afford our schools. We want excellent, fairly compensated teachers. You know, we all want a great Catholic education that's academically excellent for our students. We do. Well, you can't do that when if you're going to nickel and dime the teachers to death, right? And so we have to pay our teachers fairly. We need sustainable Catholic schools, and we need vibrant, healthy parishes that have money to offer their spiritual programs for their adults and their young adults, you know, and are able to do other things besides just Catholic education. So this is kind of the research that was done to get to this point, to get to the Good Shepherd Scholarship. You know, we had the Meitler Group study in 2014. We had the Joy of the Gospel campaign in 2015. We had the Francis Fund Committee that worked on those 5 schools to try to get them to sustainability. We had a task force that looked at all the schools in the whole diocese and all the parishes to see where they were at financially. We created the Tuition and Scholarship Committee that in 2018 that came up with the recommendation for reasonable tuition and then scholarships for the low-income family. And then in 2019, January of last year, we announced the Good Shepherd program. You know, and it was a Herculean effort to pull that off, because last spring in January, you know, 14 schools had to raise their tuition significantly. And so there were a lot of meetings just like this one last spring that I went to explain this whole thing to parents. And then 14 schools had to start using FACTS like in about 2 weeks. So they had to learn it and then teach their families how to use it so that we could keep all the scholarships in one place. And so we pulled that off last year. And this year will be much easier because a lot of families have used FACTS now. A lot of families understand more about the tuition model and why we're doing this. And so this year will be hopefully somewhat easier for everybody. And the Good Shepherd Scholarship is open now for people to apply. So the benefits of this, we would have thriving, sustainable schools instead of looking at closing schools. So the whole nation is looking at, can we keep our schools open? We don't want to do that. We want to know we can keep our schools open. We can do enhanced educational initiatives. There's more things we can do if the schools have more money, right? There's more things we can do. If we have competitive salaries, as you can imagine, when Bishop Newman's base salary was $23,000, it was kind of hard to find teachers. when you had an open position, it was hard to get a lot of applicants. Well, if you have a fair compensation, you get applicants for the jobs. And then you have money for enhanced academic programs. You know, you can work on things if you have money for it, but if you don't have any money and you're trying to skimp by, you're really just downgrading the education you can offer to your own children. Okay, so how can you help? All right, so you can evangelize, talk to other parents. If our classes are full, it doesn't cost any more money for the teacher's salary, right? And so it doesn't cost us more money to keep our classes full. And so evangelize other parents about the benefits of Catholic education. Tithe to your parish, donate, volunteer your time. You know, it takes a family to raise these children. It takes all of us to make our schools healthy. And so, you know, I just encourage all of you to live your stewardship. Encourage others, families, to consider Catholic schools. Pray for our schools. Pray for them. I pray for the schools that I work with. Pray for our students and staff. You know, the staff is trying to do the best that they can every day. And so pray for them. You know, I have one school I worked with, and when I started working with them, they had 55 students, and they were not very viable at that point because they had not enough kids in each class for the cost of the teacher's salaries. So the parents got together and they started working with other parents, trying to talk them in to come to Catholic schools. And within 3 years, they went up to 85 students by talking to other families and talking to them about how great it was for the kids at the school. And so they actually got people to move into the town so they could go to Catholic school. And so, you know, don't be afraid to do that. That's what makes our schools sustainable. So, you know, I just want to leave you with kind of a comment I got. I got a couple of really good comments from people. I was at one parent meeting like this, and there were a couple of people that were upset that their tuition was going up. And then one dad raised his hand and he said, you know, I'm one of those teachers that taught in Catholic schools, and I had to quit and go to the public school and teach, but all my kids still go here. And he said, I've got 5 kids, so I'm one of those families where this is going to be expensive. This is going to be expensive for me. He goes, but it's worth it, so I'm willing to sacrifice to get my kids to stay here. And he goes, so I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that my kids can go to school here. And so he was willing to sacrifice. Instead of complaining, he said, you know, yeah, this will be hard. I get it. It's going to be hard. Because their tuition was going up from $185 to $1,300 per student. And he had 5 kids in school. And yeah, that's going to be hard. And yet he's saying, you know what, it's worth it though. So if we have to give up a few things, that's okay. You know, it's worth it. And I can't tell you, you know, last story, how many families come up to me after meetings like this and they thank me. Because there's a lot of parents that have volunteered their time, they tithe, they do all this work for the schools, and then they see other parents that don't. And they come up and they thank me, and they're like, thank you, Eva. You know, we just want people to be held accountable. We want people to work hard. We want people to understand the mission of Catholic education. You know, and we don't mind the sacrifice. We'll sacrifice, but we don't want to be the only ones. We don't want to be the only ones. So there's a lot of people out there that really understand the mission of Catholic education. And I know you guys are a lot of them, you know, and that's why we have these great schools. And you have a great school here. You have a premier Catholic grade school in Nebraska. That's what you have here. You have a premier Catholic grade school, one of the best schools in the state. And so you're very blessed to have this school. And so that's why we have to work together to make sure it's sustainable and it's healthy, and they have the resources that they need to make sure that we have this school in 50 years.
My name is Ryan Hatt. I'm a member of Parish Council here and have been helping to serve on this committee that's been really looking at this situation and then evaluating from North American Martyrs' point of view of how this impacts all the martyrs' families, what martyrs can do to help families that are out there, and then how to make sure that everyone is growing in their faith and stewardship as a parish community here at North American Martyrs. I have 2 kids that go to school here now, and one will be going to Pius this next year. And so we really tried to bring from the committee's perspective, from parishioners, from families here at North American Martyrs that you know, are going through the same things you're going through. So really tried to look through things with that lens. Now, before I get too far into it, I mentioned this to the other group too, that if you don't recognize me, you might recognize me a little bit more when I'm doing this. I'm waving cars through the crosswalk in the morning. That's me on Thursday mornings, rain or shine out there. So it's fun to do that. As Eva mentioned, we found out this last year that we introduced the Faithful Stewardship Scholarship this last year, and that was our attempt to really keep tuition levels at that $850. And the way that we were going to do that is kind of that old-fashioned model of let's increase our stewardship, let's increase our time, talent, treasure that we're giving to this church to keep those tuition levels down. And after consulting with the diocese, and even over this last year, looking at our budget, finding that that is really not a sustainable solution for us going forward. So we had to really sit back down and take a look at the programs that we were offering and see how can we revise these to make sure that they're most beneficial for all of the families with children in the school here. So one additional cost that will be associated with tuition this year. Eva mentioned that tuition will be going up to the $1,750 level, which is that diocese requirement for all grade schools. So that is what our tuition will be, that $1,750 in 2021 school year. On top of that, we do have a technology fee. Now, we currently receive some financial assistance through some donors with the diocese that's helping to keep this cost down for now. But all schools are required to pay this fee. And this will be a $225 fee on top of tuition per student each year. So it is an additional cost, something that will be, I'm sure, a challenge for many of us out there, but wanted to make sure that everyone was clear that that is an additional fee on top of tuition that we will be seeing for this next school year. So the response that we had from North American Martyrs then, we took a look at our Faithful Steward Scholarship, how we're helping families, and we really came up with two approaches. One is the Kateri Scholarship, which is a need-based financial scholarship for families here at Martyrs, and then revising that Faithful Steward Scholarship a little bit. So same content, kind of same goals that we had with that as last year, but slightly revised for this next year going forward. So we'll go over that here. So the Kateri Scholarship will help give some financial assistance to those families. So really it is intended to help those families with financial challenges that really just don't meet the Good Shepherd scholarship requirements. To give you, I know this is probably small to some in the back there, but this information will be shared. Just to give you an idea of up to that 300% poverty level, if you have a household of 4, so that would be 2 children in your household, it's about a gross income of $77,000. So if you have 2 children going to K through 12 Catholic schools, or two at Martyrs, then
actually just 2 children, household size.
2 children, then you would qualify for the Kateri Scholarship. So again, that next kind of income bracket up that just didn't qualify for the Good Shepherd. In order to receive that funding, you do have to apply through FACTS. The dollar amount will be half of what the Good Shepherd Scholarship awards. So the Good Shepherd Scholarship was at $1,300 for this next school year. The Kateri Scholarship will be $650 for those families that qualify. Now you can only qualify for one or the other. You qualify for Good Shepherd, that doesn't mean you also qualify for Kateri. So if you qualify for Kateri, that means you did not qualify for Good Shepherd. So you only get one or the other of those scholarships. And the idea behind that is really to try and help as many families as we can. So the Faithful Steward Scholarship, we're still calling this a scholarship, but really it's just a pledge of your overall stewardship. The goal last year with introducing the Faithful Steward Scholarship was getting families involved in the church, involved in their faith, grow spiritually, grow as a community, challenge yourself with tithing to the parish, and really just grow overall as a faith-based community here. So the actual cost per student at North American Martyrs this next school year is about $4,000. So that's how much it costs to send your kids to school here. The stewardship allows for tuition to be set at that $1,750. So it's not necessarily going to be awarded. We just want to be sure that people are growing in their faith, growing in their stewardship, so that we can maintain that tuition level of $17.50 and continue that lower tuition level for years to come. So it is really the same format, it's a new format, but the same content and same intentions as 2019. And so the idea behind this is whether you apply for or qualify for Good Shepherd, whether you qualify for Kateri, everyone will qualify for the Faithful Steward Scholarship as long as you make a good faith pledge of the Faithful Steward Scholarship. And so that amount then would be the $2,250 then that Martyrs will be covering. They will be subsidizing your tuition. And really all they're asking for in return is that you grow in your faith and grow in your stewardship with the community here. Just to back up one slide here. So this will we'll also have that application. Everyone remembers filling out those paper pledge forms last year. We were able to actually add those questions into FACTS. So whether you're applying for Good Shepherd, Kateri, or Faithful Steward Scholarship, everyone here will actually be going to FACTS and filling out an application there. So even if you're only asking for the Faithful Steward Scholarship portion and you don't apply for the other two or qualify for the other two scholarships, you will still go to FACTS and fill out your application online there. A little bit more to come on that. So just quickly review the Good Faith Pledge here. We definitely want to leave some time for some questions. The Good Faith Pledge is around 4 categories here: your faithful witness, participation in Mass, the time that you spend with God in prayer individually and as a family, the talents that you serve by serving the parish, serving the school, volunteer time, and then treasure, that tithing goal that we've set for every family. So I won't get into this too much. The questions will be on that FACTS form. But Faithful Witness, really the goal there is that every family to attend every Sunday Mass and all holy days as well. I know a lot of families here do that. There are many that don't. And we're just asking you to grow in your faith and make that pledge to at least do more than you did last year, with the goal of trying to be here every Sunday 100% of the time. With the time, this has always been a requirement here, really, but attending at least one dynamic Catholic event every 3 years. So a question on the survey will ask if you attended an event in 2018 and 2019. If your answer is no to that, then you do need to pledge to attend an event in 2020, in this calendar year. Asking for different prayer, different ministry activities to be involved in as well, so making a pledge in those categories. With your talent, we will ask all families to still volunteer 12 hours of volunteer time. We're still looking at different ways that we can sign up for volunteer time, track that a little bit better, trying to be more efficient. For right now, that'll really just be your word against ours that you're doing a lot of this, but we do ask that you make that pledge and then report what you did over the last year. And then treasure the goal of 5% of your income going to North American Martyrs. You can have 5% go to other organizations out there that you like to support, but we do ask every family to try and do at least 5% to North American Martyrs here, which will continue to help keep that tuition cost down for students. If you're not able to do that 5%, and we understand that can be a challenge for a lot of people on where you're at in your journey, we just ask that you try and give more than you gave last year. Try and increase that 1 percentage point each year. So just to give you a few examples of how the tuition will calculate out. So this top example here is your family only qualifies for the Faithful Steward Scholarship. Total tuition cost is $4,000. By making your pledge, you get the $2,250 in a scholarship fund, and then really your tuition is at that $1,750 plus the technology fee. And that would be per student, of course. Family income qualifies you for the Kateri Scholarship, so up to that 300, between the 225 and 300% poverty level. Cost per student is at $4,000. You get the assistance with the Faithful Steward Scholarship of $2,250. The Kateri Scholarship would give you an additional $650 scholarship there, making your student cost $1,100 plus the technology fee.
For 3 students.
Up to 3 students, correct. So the Good Shepherd Scholarship or that tuition cap will cover the 4th, 5th, 6th student that you have in K through 12 for this next school year. And then if your family does qualify for the Good Shepherd Scholarship, here's the scenario there. $4,000 cost, $2,250 for a Faithful Steward Scholarship. Good Shepherd Scholarship would give you a $1,300 scholarship for the first student, leaving your family tuition cost at $450 plus the technology fee. Again, that's up to 3 students.
And the technology fee is covered by the Good Shepherd for this.
Oh, okay, so just a clarification on that then. The technology fee is covered by Good Shepherd in this scenario, so it would be just the $450 if you qualify for Good Shepherd. So next steps, again, every family, you just want to make sure this is crystal clear, every family does fill out a fax application. There is a $35 charge to fill out the fax application, so just a heads up on that. For the Good Shepherd and the Kateri Scholarship applications, you must submit your financial records. You can do either your 2018 tax returns, or if you're a go-getter and you're already with your 2019, you can submit those as well, but one of the 2 last year's. If you are applying for just the Faithful Steward Scholarship and you don't qualify for those need-based scholarships, you do not need to submit your financial records, but again, you do still need to complete the fax form. So as far as instructions in those scenarios, here's the link to go to find that application form. There is a question asking you if you want financial aid. Everyone in the room answer yes. We do want financial aid because you're getting it in one of those 3 categories. There will be a question that asks if you're applying only for the North American Martyrs Faithful Steward Scholarship. If you enter yes, you do not have to enter your tax information. So in sections 5 through 10, all you have to do is enter a $0 amount in each of those, and then you can submit that application. If you are applying for the Kateri Scholarship or the Good Shepherd Scholarship, you do need to enter your financial information in those sections, so have your tax forms and everything ready. And the deadline to do all of this is by March 31st. And so I like to end with this quote. We've received a lot of blessings over the year. Our parish has been very blessed over the years. With all that we've received, it's time that we give back to the church and give back to our kids that are going to school now, but give back to the kids who will be going here for years to come. So I think we'll open it up for questions now. If anyone has any questions, go ahead. I know it's a crowded room, so if you have something, raise your hand, shout it out, and we'll do our best to answer anything.
Repeat the question. Okay.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks.
Question over here.
Book fees?
Book fees?
No, everything that is.
So
talked
the
about-
question is if there will be book fees for the next year.
There's no hidden fees. At this point, it's the $1,750 plus the $225 is the maximum you will pay. So there won't be, clubs and things like that in sports, those are separate, but as far as tuition and fees, this is it.
Yes.
If you have more than 3 children, do you have to put your financial when you fill it out?
So the question is, if you have more than 3 children, do you have to submit your financial information?
Yes, you have to submit your tax documents, and the reason that we do that is because it has, FACTS does the verification of the scholarships for us. Remember, we don't spend a lot of money administering the scholarships, and so for the Good Shepherd, they check the income against the tax document and the number of dependents. And then for the family tuition cap, they check the number of dependents, which is on the tax documents. That's why you have to submit them. But that's only used to verify the number of dependents, okay? And that's for the tuition cap. So you want, if you have more than 3 children in the schools, you want to apply for the tuition cap, okay?
Yes.
Do you anticipate tuition to increase year after year, and if so, at what percentage?
So the question is, do we anticipate tuition to increase year over year, and at what percentage?
So you remember the diocese is trying to trend toward higher tuition, and the schools can pick what they want to do, but if they want to maximize the scholarship, they have to increase tuition. And so next year, you can see what tuition will be for next year, because the scholarship will be $1,600 next year. So tuition would have to be, you know, you'd have to be about $2,150 to, so that would be what tuition is next year, but then the scholarship will be $1,600. Make sense? And then we're not giving direction after that just yet, because we're trying to make sure we can raise enough money to pay for the scholarships, right? Because we still have to raise some, and so we're trying to raise money to cover the scholarships. But our goal would be to, you know, possibly be able to continue to increase the diocesan scholarship and increase the percentage of poverty level that we pay for, you know, but we have to kind of make sure we have enough money for that first. Good question.
Will you also be increasing tuition for preschool?
So the question is, will we be also increasing tuition for preschool? Father, did you want to answer that?
Minimally, we talked about maybe going up $25 a month, because we're the lowest currently in Lincoln.
Tell them we're doing like a survey right now to figure that out and doing what we can.
Sister said we're currently doing a survey to figure that out, but it's not going to go up anywhere near what we're seeing the grade school tuition go up.
I'm assuming if I have children in college, they don't count. Right?
Is it a Catholic college?
No.
Oh, no. No, in either case, no, unfortunately not.
Just out of curiosity, how many people did fax last year? Show of hands. Okay, it's way easier the second time. Way easier. It took me a long time the first time. We tested ours just to see how it worked. A lot of that stuff's pre-populated, it's way easier. So the people that haven't filled it in, the first year's a pain to fill all the information in. But after that, it all comes back up, and it's much easier the second year.
So that also kind of some of the changes we made at the diocesan level was, because our scholarship is just income-based, we took a lot of questions out, so the questions are actually shorter this year. And then also, if you don't want to supply your Social Security number because you're only doing the Faithful Steward Scholarship, you can type in any unique number, because fax doesn't verify the Social Security number. But if somebody else has used it, you're going to have to come up with the number one, so another one. So you can't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, because somebody else already got that one.
Ryan, can you let them know that we'll send out the information tomorrow, that like we did after Sunday, but we'll finish with the fax information that we said don't fill out fax yet in the last.
Yeah, so Sister just reminded me, we'll send all of this information, any updated information as well, out through email, especially with the steps of how to apply for fax, kind of what to do in different scenarios and everything there. We had to figure that out over the last couple of days here, so thank you for your patience while we did figure that out. But we hope to have clear instructions on that for everyone going out. And if you do have any questions, anyone from the committee would be happy to answer questions for you, Father and Sister as well.
We also were just, I can do this a little bit. We also were just given clarification on what that technology fee is covering. And we will be transparent with that. I have not gotten through the document. I don't know if you have. I know it was just sent out yesterday, I think, with what it's actually covering. And once I get that read through, I will be sending that out to you as well. I know a lot of people have said, what is that covering if it's going up that high? And I kept saying, we haven't been given that clarification. We did receive that yesterday. I have not read through it all, so I can't give you a very good answer yet.
Last year, we got $285 of benefit per student here. It was a high year because we got a lot of computers, a lot of laptops, a lot of iPads, a lot of smart boards, a lot of technology, a lot of hardware, a lot of salaries at the diocesan office, copyrights, all those They give us great service, but does cost a lot of money. Yes.
I don't recall last year how we paid that fee and how is it going?
It was, I think, $25.
But did we pay it with our tuition
It was
checks?
part of $8.50 because we ate to nickel and dime. We just lumped it all together. So actually, it
So-
only went up last year $25 in tuition, I think, when you include that technology fee.
So the $225 will just be lumped into our tuition and
Well,
then we pay
this-
it monthly or?
This year, it'll be $17.50 tuition plus $225 tech fee, so $19.75. To be honest, we're looking seriously with FACS. FACS' main job is a tuition collection agency for colleges and high schools and grade schools across the country. They do a pretty fantastic job, so a small group has been dialoguing with them in terms of what it would look like if we just had them collect all our tuition. As you know, it's a big job for Carol, Connie, and it's not getting any easier. And they could also collect, extended care. They can do lunch fees. They can do chess club. They can do all those ancillary fees as well, all in one place. So we'd have to determine what we want to prepay, what people want to pay as they go. But it would be a big relief, and we may pay the cost of that for you, or at least pay half of it, so you're not having to incur another fee. But then you would just deal with FACS and pay all the tuition that way. So there's a lot of benefits of it. So you'll hear about that too. But I want to be honest. I just talked to FACS yesterday. I just got results back from a few pastors who've been doing it, getting their feedback. So that's kind of where that study is. And but I would say it's looking pretty likely. We're just going to let FACS collect everything. The nice thing will be, you go on to FACS, you get all your scholarships. I'm interested in Dillon scholarship going to be through FACS too, or is that gone? Or
There'll still be Dillon scholarships, but they won't go through FACS. They don't
Okay.
require it.
that might be one exception, but otherwise everything would be calculated through FACS. You know, if you wanted to pay, hot lunch, and you wanted to pay some of your extended care in FACS, but they would be collecting it all. So we'd be out of the collection agency, and it'd be a great relief. And then the front office can concentrate. Carol does a job about 4 people, more than likely. So she could do the job just of 3 people then. She could be more focused and more relaxed, and we
Good
all
news
like
is
that.
Tracy's learning the job of 2 people now, so we'll only need her doing 2 people's jobs.
Want to close in prayer?
Any other questions?
Actually, there's one right here that I think would be helpful.
Smith?
I have a question, Tyler.
Yes.
For FACS, if I have someone at Pius and one here, do I have to fill it out twice and pay that fee twice? Or is it just look at it once?
Just once.
Just once?
Once.
Okay. Thank you.
And there's a question right here that I think.
Let me ask this question. It's kind of a loaded one. I don't want to spring this, but
Sorry.
when we register on FACS and we put all our kids in there, does that count as registering at the school?
No.
No.
Hold on. For those of you who have ticks because of the registration process last year, which would be me, we are hoping to simplify that at some level. Probably where we just have new students fill that out, and the rest of you will just have you let us know if something changed. I don't know what we're gonna do because the diocese is trying to require us to use it, but unless something gets changed, we will not comply just at this point, because that was a nightmare I promise you, all summer, we were trying to figure it out too, and it was not helpful and it was very stressful. So hopefully we'll find a better solution to that, but don't have ticks because of it, because I'll just have the ticks for all of us.
All right, and then we had another question here about divorced families, and I'm assuming what income level you look at for scholarship.
It will be a total of 4 kids, like having 2 with the new and then 2 with the old family. So how would that work?
So that's a really good question. So the question is, how does FACS deal with divorces? And I've left that up to FACS. So the best thing to do in FACS is to supply all your documentation and supply the income of both parents that are in that current household, okay? And then if you have like a divorce decree that says one parent has to pay the tuition or whatever, any other information you can give to FACTS. And then FACTS deals with those kind of as a one-by-one situation, but they do it across the country. So I kind of try to stay out of it myself, and then they give us a recommendation. And last year we took all their recommendations. But I would say to submit as much information as you can for your family. And they're really good at that. The other thing we found out too is that if you make less than $12,000, you don't have to file taxes. And so we have FACTS give us a recommendation on people that don't file taxes as well. And I just kind of leave it up to them to make it fair across our whole diocese, because we're looking at, 32 schools and 6,800 students. And so I don't want to be in the middle of that, trying to judge, well, this family might need it and this family doesn't. And so I let FACTS do that. They're the experts at that. So that's a really good question. I did want to say one thing, when we're closing here. Remember I told you we had 6,800 kids in 2016, 2017. And this last year, we raised tuition in 13 schools and got FACTS going, got the scholarship program going, closed 2 schools. And this year we started August with 6,800 students. And that's just a testament to the families in our diocese. And the schools that closed did a great job of getting those students placed at one of our other schools. And, because everybody was, of course, afraid if you do this, then these families will threaten to leave, and they might leave. And that's not really what happened. If you explain it to people logically, people can get their heads around it. And then if you make sure that the people that have a financial need have a resource to go to, that's really easy to get to. Just like Blaine said and Ryan said, FACTS is relatively easy. You can get it done in 20 or 30 minutes, and especially the second year, because you just get, most of the information is going to be pre-populated for you. So, I just encourage everybody to go there and apply. If you have any trouble, make sure that you get to the school, and then if they need my help, then they get my help. But I just encourage you all to apply.
All right, if you have any other questions, feel free to come up. We want to try and get people out of here. Now that we're a little over an hour, but we'll go ahead and end in prayer.
Sister knows how to dismiss large crowds, so she can take care of that. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, thank you for a good meeting tonight. Thank you for patience of our people, and thank you for a good presentation, all the work that's gone into this. We give you praise and glory as we say, glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you all for coming.